Have you never heard? Oh my god, interesting.
Like cryptocurrency?
Your upper middle class is showing. Kia ora guys, and welcome to this week's episode of the Wholesome Half Hour. I am Mackenzie.
Here I'm Sarah.
Yeah, and I don't know why I agreed to that. Yes, you are, Sarah.
I am.
And
I'm actually the imposter Sarah. I'm Sarah's identical twin. Sarah couldn't make it. So.
yeah, you're still in Castle Point.
Yeah.
So in this week's episode, we thought that what we would talk about is, I couldn't think of something that like summed it all up in a sentence, but it's sort of like why you should care about what's happening in this world. Like something that, you know, schools don't do a very good job of letting people know about. Not just why you should care, but where you should be trying to consume your media if you're looking for respectable, reliable, real news.
So like the ultimate guide to news and current affairs.
Yeah, and yeah, a bit of like, not just why you should care, but here's places that you can access as well to keep up to date with things.
Very cool.
Yeah, so this is more your domain than mine.
It is. It is.
So, and it's funny because we always talk about, we need to have guests on to talk about things that we specialise in.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've ever done an episode on something like this.
Yeah.
And I thought, how weird.
Yeah, we've never dug into either of our specialities.
Yeah, actually, mine either. I feel like mine sort of gets sprinkled into a lot of different things, but I haven't spent like a whole episode like actually discussing something. Yeah. Maybe later.
Yeah,
I don't know.
cool. What did you want to start off thinking about?
Well, I guess.
Do we want to do the why first?
Yeah, like, well, what do you think is the usefulness, or why do you think people should care about trying to keep up to date with that kind of thing?
I think it's okay. I'll come back to the caveat that I'll throw in because I'm an interesting person. But
I start picking holes in your own argument before you even started.
Pretty much, yeah. That's concerning. Wow. Thanks for pointing that out. But no, keeping up with current affairs or current events is really important. And current events and news encompasses a whole range of things. It encompasses the things people classically think about: politics, business. Politics and business. National, your traditional. But it also encompasses like sports is news, entertainment is news. They are all news, and like people like to like classify news as like good news and bad news, not by quality of outlet, but by like genre of news. Like entertainment news is still it's still news. It's more about consuming like. I think it's important to consume like a variety of news from like a variety of the categories. You don't if you're real into politics, that's cool, but it's good to keep tabs, just know a little bit about like what's going on in the other arenas.
And with that as well is it's just like anything. If you are interested in, you know, one particular thing, say, I don't know, New Zealand politics in particular. Say that that's something that does interest you. Pardon?
A great thing to be interested in.
Yeah, an interesting, topic. But, if you are really, really interested in New Zealand politics, what would be, what would help that, or what would make your understanding even better is if you had an understanding of world politics, right?
Absolutely.
Because then you not only understand New Zealand's politics, but you understand where New Zealand's politics sit in relation to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
If you only focus on one thing, you're only going to know about one thing, two in particular, and especially that can be problematic if you have like a lot of opinions.
Things contextualize themselves in ways, I don't know, people don't realize on first glance. Like politics is a fascinating example. I personally don't see this as a very controversial issue, but anyway, so like a controversial issue that goes through politics, going through politics in New Zealand and overseas at the moment is abortion, right? So in New Zealand, the current law is that two medical professionals have to say it's unsafe or something along those lines for a woman to have an abortion.
It doesn't have to be unsafe.
Well, it has to cause harm. Is that the term?
Yeah, it's either mental or physical.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be like that your body like couldn't cope with it. It's if having a child would cause you like extreme mental distress, which it would in some cases, then that is also allowed.
It has the caveat that generally anyone who wants it
can get it.
Which means the law. Anyway, we won't get into the details of it. What I'm trying to say is that's the situation. The current Labour government has indicated that they want to change that and take it out of the Crimes Act, because it's currently in the Crimes Act. To have an abortion is technically a crime, never enforced in practice.
No.
But technically speaking, that's the way it is.
It's like in the same way, sorry to kind of cut you off, it's in the exact same way that before 1983, I think it was. Oh no, it's no. I'm thinking of a different one. I was thinking of a different law. Like another really common sort of example in a similar realm. It's always got to do with women's rights. That it's like crime, but not a crime. I don't know, but like a similar situation is the sex service industry, where
1990s.
Yeah, 1990s. Yeah, I was thinking of a different marital law in 1983, but with that
Prostitution Reform Act, something like that.
Yeah. So before that, it was illegal to offer the service, but not illegal to pay for the service, and you can understand the obvious sexism there, because it takes two to tango. You can't be the kind of person to condemn someone for offering a service that you yourself utilise, you know what I mean? And so law changes meant that prostitution was decriminalised. There's just like an unfairness in there, right?
Anyway, the reason I brought up the abortion example is...
I went off track.
It's an issue in New Zealand where this is the current situation, and the current government has indicated that they want to take it out of the Crimes Act. And having the contextual awareness, so on first glance, you can look at that a current ways. You can look at that a few different ways. You can be like, okay, New Zealand's quite liberal, like abortion's very readily accessible, but it's still a crime. But on balance, that's okay. That's one point of view. That's not my point of view, but that's a legitimate point of view, right? You could also look at it a different way and be like, abortion's like technically a crime in New Zealand. That's like really conservative. That's like not good. And then, so if you want to kind of evaluate that in a more objective measure, like obviously you can do it on like a moral ground as well. Like that's cool.
Moral and religion and all that stuff that also feeds into.
But if you want to like put it in perspective and like understand where New Zealand sits in a global context, you have to understand the global context.
Yeah, exactly.
And the way you do that is by consuming like other types of news, and also like if you like start looking into entertainment news and stuff, like it comes up from time to time in that category.
Well, and the thing is, there is a lot of crossover,
because there's the
right?
Alabama thing as well, and that's an overseas example, and you see
Georgia,
Georgia,
and a lot of other states are trying to follow suit. It's weird that they figured out time travel like that. I don't know. But yeah, and so and a lot
with our such edgy liberal opinions.
I didn't put anything. I didn't put anything out there. Anyway, by getting a greater understanding of what is going on, not only in our backyard but in the world, you can actually get a greater sort of perspective on things, right? Because you can see, where do we sit with things, and where should we be doing things further, And if you don't look out further, you won't know cool things. Like, did you know that Botswana just made same-sex relationships legal?
I don't know.
Yeah, and before that, it was punishable by 7 years in prison or something like that.
Yeah,
something mad like that. Yeah. And
being gay was technically illegal in New Zealand until early 1990s.
We were very slow to the par on that one, and because marriage is legal in New Zealand.
As of
same
2012-ish.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, so we are sort of up to the par on that, right?
Generally, yeah.
And there are still, things that definitely do. It's definitely not 100. Yeah, it's not 100% equal, but it's getting.
Yeah, just as a general rule, not in life, but in the world, politics generally lags, but it doesn't always. But generally, it lags behind popular opinion or popular consensus by a few years. Well, it's just the nature of
that's just how it works. That's just how law works, right? Law is created by the demand of the people.
Yeah.
And so if the demand of the people is for further equality, if it's for women's rights, if it's for whatever it may be, environment is another big one. With all the school protests and stuff like that, that is a very good situation where currently society is making the action, and unfortunately there is this lag between societal change and legislation, but that is something that there will have flow-on effects. It's just unfortunate it's not like immediate.
Yeah.
You know,
it's within. It's also just like it's like kind of like it's like just a caveat of the system is that like it's within politicians' interests to not try to be ahead of public opinion, even if that's like maybe the right thing to do. Yeah. You can argue that anyway.
Well, it's just a flaw of a democratic system, right?
Yeah.
Because what it is a big old popularity contest. Let's not mince words. Like, it's a popularity contest, and
sure.
Politicians advertise themselves to certain demographic groups of people. Older baby boomers, millennials, people who are concerned with the environment, people who are concerned with business.
People on low incomes, people on high incomes.
They make themselves attractive to certain demographics to get their votes.
Yeah.
It's like they all want to be prom queen, you know?
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah. Where we go.
So this is why you should care about things that are happening in the world. There is so much overlap. Oh, that's what I was also going to say. There is overlap, right? Between,
there's huge overlap.
You know, like if a big scandal breaks out in the entertainment industry, a big one that you can think of is the whole Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good example of a lot of different issues, right? That's there's sexism. It's in the entertainment industry. It's blackmail. It's a lot of different things. I don't know if people know about the Harvey Weinstein thing. Is that like...
Yeah, no, it's pretty
okay, cool.
It's pretty...
Basically, it's just a gross pale style male being a pale style male.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the reason that we should care about the news is you want to know about the things that are happening in the world. And I think this year is a year that I have endeavoured to try and engage more with that kind of thing. And there are different ways that you can go about doing this. It doesn't have to be like a hard slog every morning where you listen to the 6 a.m. announcements on Radio New Zealand.
An efficient way to consume news.
It is.
You'll know everything you need to know in 7 minutes.
My flatmate does that every morning. He has his rolled oats in the morning and listens.
Some very edgy music.
Yeah.
They changed it a couple of years ago.
And I think one of the main ways...
not Cheap Point, Morning Report, Cheap Point's in the evening.
One of the main ways that I consume media is Instagram. And I know that sounds very unreliable, but it comes down to the pages that you follow and whether they're reliable. Like a page in particular that I really like to follow is, I don't know if I can say it because it's got a swear word in the name. Let's
spell it out.
You can
bleep
it.
About. No, that's too boring. I don't want to bleep it. Just be like 1, 2, 3, 4. You care about. That's what you said.
Yeah. It's just SHIT. You should care about.
Yeah.
That felt. I was like dumbing that down a lot, but that's fine. Anyway, and like the page is run by like some really cool people, who do their best to try and they see these big things that are happening in the world, and they make it into a very accessible format for people to either just read a caption on their Instagram feed, or they also run a blog where they do more in-depth analysis of certain things that are going on in the world. Like a big one at the moment is what's going on in Sudan. And that's something that popular media hasn't picked up on, but they never do when it's genocide, so it's fine. And that's, I think this sort of also lends itself to another idea is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my perception on it, is New Zealand news sources are concerned about New Zealand news. They're very poor at giving you any kind of global perspective. And so I think if you want to know what's going on in the world, you have to go outside New Zealand news, because New Zealand news will tell you what's happening in New Zealand, in our insulated little country that's down the bottom of the map, and just another state of Australia. It doesn't give you enough information to actually know what's going on in the world.
Okay, so two things. We'll talk about the New Zealand news things. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the way New Zealand Herald stuff works is 90% of their news. Sorry. 90% of their news is made by journalists in New Zealand. They're catering for a New Zealand audience. Yeah. They're talking about New Zealand, that's their speciality. Most of the stories you see about international are syndicated stories, so they're part of New Zealand Herald's part of networks. They have partnerships with other outlets like New York Times.
So they basically just pick up other people's articles.
They literally just publish those articles.
Yeah,
that's how it works.
And
when the Guardian,
they just rub it out at the top and change it to stuff.
Yeah. When the Guardian needs an article about New Zealand, they do the same thing.
It's a tit for tat.
Journalism works. Generally, they have like, I think the Herald will have like one reporter in like the UK, a freelancer in the US. They'll be about it.
And it probably wouldn't even be their full-time job.
No, there'd probably be a freelancer who worked for like
a few different news outlets.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how international news works for Stuff Herald. So yeah, if you want really in-depth coverage, like you probably should go to more world-focused outlets if when you're looking for news about the world. When you're looking for news about New Zealand, you're much better off going to like a Herald and stuff.
The thing is, though, as well, in the same way with the politics, the media presents what the people want, and it's just like it says something about New Zealanders that they are only interested in New Zealand news.
And compared to read American news?
Yeah, but they've actually got something to talk about. We don't most of the time.
Yeah,
you know, like it's like what we think is big news is nothing compared to on a global scale. Like the things that we care about are not things that most people care about.
The other thing that I wanted to point out was you talked about that blog, and like so, you have news and you have opinion.
Yes.
And like, there's nothing wrong with following like opinion writers, blogs you're interested in, columnists you're interested in, but you have to remember that opinion is opinion, and they're like putting like their personal opinion into something, whereas like news, generally speaking, should be like objective. Facts.
Yeah.
Without like.
But the thing is, our news outlets aren't that though, are they? They're not.
If it's not labelled opinion, it's not opinion. Technically. Do you have an example?
I just think in so much of New Zealand news, it is so, regardless of whether or not they frame it as an opinion, they leave you, like there is an intention to make you think a certain kind of way.
But is that consistent across all articles? Are they all trying to lean into
not absolutely all, but more than what is just labelled opinion.
Sure, like different articles frame things in different ways, right?
Yeah.
But that, like, it's not like a. That's just the nature. That's kind of the nature of the news. It's not a. There's no. So yes, like news is distorted in certain ways, but there's not a consistent bias that's being applied across all news to lean you in a particular direction, politically or otherwise.
No. Yeah, 100%. But then shouldn't the advice there be that people, regardless of whether or not it's labelled opinion, should be reading things or consuming things, bearing in mind that it may be trying to persuade them to think a certain way, think a certain thing, react a certain way.
Yeah.
So rather than just like opinion, I think it's also other articles. You have to look at it and think, well, even the person who writes it, where did they get the information? Was it first-hand? Was it not? Where did they get it from? You don't know a lot of the time, particularly, that didn't come out right, particularly when it is articles or current events that are very polarizing. Politically charged, anything to do with like anything that humans kind of do. Like you can get numbers on that 100%, but that's usually after the event has happened. If you are wanting to keep up to date with an event as it is happening, there is going to be a lot of opinion. There are going to be sides, right? And there's going to that opinion and those voices and those perspectives have to be voiced to give the people an understanding of what's going on.
And news will often frame things. It's just the nature of it. Will often frame things as polarizing issues as two camps. Where generally it's more of a scale. Like sure, there's some people in this camp and some people in this camp, but like. Yeah, and it can make one
a very good example of that is New Zealand politics. People like to pit Labour and National like they are
like at war with
like
each other.
Fascism versus communism. No, New Zealand politics are mild at best. We are lukewarm. There is not a lot of difference.
Like policy overlap like 80%. Yeah.
There's about 20% difference between Labour and National. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't like think about who you want to vote for.
But just understand it's not like it's not a knife and
exactly. It's got absolutely nothing like American politics. You know what I mean? Like between Republicans and Democrats.
It's not like and like in New Zealand, it's very unusual for governments to roll back efforts of the previous government. It happens occasionally, but it's very unusual. Especially with any sort of major policy effort. It's not like in the States where like. Literally, the next government comes in and like healthcare will be like slashed.
Yeah, exactly. Obamacare, who?
Yeah. Yikes.
Yikes. Yeah, no, exactly, and that's just it. And that's another reason why, having that world perspective is really good, because if you're interested in New Zealand politics, you can get a better understanding of New Zealand politics when you look outside and you realise that there aren't as much differences as you think there is. And if you keep your understanding insular, if you keep it within New Zealand, if you're only consuming New Zealand media, the way that they put it is like they are worlds apart. And that's why these perspectives, I think, are really important.
Yeah, so we go back to the abortion issue and you see New Zealand's arguing about whether we should whether it should be essential, not whether it should be available to all, but not technically
There's
legal,
always going to be hoops to jump through.
or should it be decriminalised? That's the argument in New Zealand. But then you put that in perspective and you realise in the states they're trying to make it illegal, or in certain states they're trying to make it illegal, and they're trying to make it illegal to go out of state to get an abortion, which kind of defeats the whole point. The whole point of states is that if you don't like the rules,
you can leave.
You can leave. But yeah.
George Orwell had it down. America, Big Brother's watching you, and he's for sure going to control your life, and thought crime is going to become a thing soon.
Nice.
Anyway.
Love AI. Love having your phone listen to you all the time. Hey Google, how's it going? Okay Google, how are you? It talked, it was very quiet, but Google is doing great things.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay. We can move on now.
Sweet.
Flexing. Weird flex.
Weird flex, but okay.
Hey Siri.
So I guess the next thing is, what does make a reliable news source? What makes a reputable news source? What is something that you could trust? What would be a place that you could reliably trust? Not hit or miss.
I think you could reliably trust any outlet that has some sort of editorial oversight by an external body.
So basically some sort of policing.
So they're a member of, in New Zealand the example would be that they're a member of the New Zealand Media Council, formerly the New Zealand Press Council. Because that means that they're committed, so they've signed up and said that they're going to respect a certain set of rules and publish to a certain set of standards, and then there's there's some aspect of accountability if they slip outside those standards. Okay,
so what New Zealand outlets are in that?
So that's most of them. So that's your Herald, your Stuff, your News Hub. Broadcasters in New Zealand. So the New Zealand Media Council is a self-governing body. So all the companies are members and they have a board, and so essentially if Stuff does something wrong, they sit down with people from Stuff, Herald, News Hub, etc., and they have a discussion and then they make a ruling. But it wouldn't be like I wrote the article and then I'm at the table being is this good or not? There's a degree of separation even though there's the same outlet.
Right.
Then broadcasters in New Zealand are broadcasters are regulated by the New Zealand Broadcasting Standards Authority, BSA. So those are a legal set of requirements. So if they don't comply with the Broadcasting Standards Authority's codes, the Broadcasting Standards Authority can take them to court and order them to do all sorts of things. They can technically order them off the air. That never really happens, but it can do. They have ordered people to not play ads for certain periods of time, which hurts companies financially if they can't run ads for a day. Yeah. That has happened before.
Yeah. Well, it's a punishment, but it's not crippling, right?
Sure. Yeah. It hurts though.
Exactly. Well, it needs to hurt.
Yeah.
It needs to hurt for them to take it seriously, right?
Yeah.
That's the idea of punishment. Wow.
Such.
I don't consume a lot of New Zealand media.
Yeah.
I don't
know, people... Okay. Is New Zealand media perfect? Absolutely not. No,
but none is.
But I feel like people give it a harder rap than it deserves.
I know I'm much more critical of it than you are.
Yeah. That doesn't mean you should just read stuff blindly, but I think people are very cynical about it in a way that's not necessarily justified. Media make mistakes.
Do you know what's actually genuinely a thing that frustrates me?
What?
Is a survey was done to New Zealanders about what they thought the most respectable or reliable way to get information about anything is. And people rated TV over government documents. Like, nobody trusts government documents, and that is the most insane thing to me.
Yes and no. Okay, so like, should government documents be trusted? Yeah, with a reasonable degree, but there's no like perspective there.
No, but it's not supposed to.
Yeah, but what
A government document
what
is
do you wanna
supposed to
know?
like make you feel something.
But what do you want to know? What are you trying to learn about? Government documents not going to give you perspective.
What if
are you
what
looking
if
for?
it was like new legislation?
If you picked up legislation, like, I don't think you can expect the average person to like go and read like an act.
But the thing is, the government makes like information packs for people.
Like
it's not that they would hand them the full legislation and be
Sure.
like, go to part
Yeah.
3A.
Sure, but like,
This isn't about the regularity of it. This is about the reliability of it.
sure,
People
like,
don't trust it is my issue here.
I'm not saying you shouldn't trust it, but it doesn't have like it doesn't context. Like part of the role of media is to provide perspective on something. The government's not going to tell you that, yes, we have this new policy, but it's rolling back these previous efforts.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about reliability. I'm talking about the trustworthiness of the information they're providing.
But
The
it doesn't
assumption-
provide the full picture of the information. The information the government is, like, it's accurate. I'm not saying it's unreliable or inaccurate.
Yeah, no, but and like I agree with you. I
Yeah.
fully agree with you, but we're arguing two different things right now.
Right. What?
My argument here is a government document
Yeah.
is not going to lie.
I'm not saying it's going to lie.
No, and I know you're agreeing with me, but still trying to argue with me.
Okay.
Like, my issue here is that people don't think it's reliable, like, as in they assume that the government is going to lie to them in legislative documents.
I generally speaking do not think the government is trying to lie to you. This is a real politician.
No, exactly. No,
Yeah.
but that's just it. But a survey of New Zealanders
Yeah.
showed that more people
Yeah.
think that TV news is more reliable and trustworthy than something produced by the government.
Sure. People have very low trust in politicians.
Yeah,
It's
no,
like
no,
a-
no, I know
it's
they do.
like a
It's-
very long,
1980s
It's been the
neoliberal
case for a long
reforms,
time.
no trust, disillusionment with politicians. We love neoliberalism. Darren doesn't know what it is.
I know what neoliberalism is. Thank you. Very
No,
much.
you do. We've talked about it before. Yeah, what the heck? Sorry. I didn't know what the face was. I guess it was
It's just like
my
an uncomfortable smile.
just chat.
Yeah, I didn't want to get into that.
Fair shout. That's something for another day. I guess. So, what kind of media outlets do you regularly go to?
I'd go to like, so your RNZ, your
Mm-hmm.
stuff. I think Stuff and Herald are kind of the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They more or less release the same stuff.
Yeah. So Stuff, I go to RNZ. Those are my main ones. If I'm on television for some reason, sometimes like political stuff's cool on television because you get to see people argue and talk and get to see the enthusiasm in their voice. I'll go to News Hub.
Yeah.
Again, I think News Hub and One News are kind of the same. Yeah, but it's good to have competition, which is why New Zealand Herald and Stuff should not have merged, as
Right.
they have not.
Interesting.
Comcom said they can't.
So, what about like outside of New Zealand?
Your Guardian, your New York Times, your Washington
Do you
Post.
go to Al Jazeera?
I not recently, but I have in the past watched the old Al Jazeera News Hour. They have the longest. They claim to have the longest display in the television news industry. Like in their studio in Doha, they have this really long screen.
What a weird claim to fame.
It's like 25 meters long or something. It's just this really long screen.
Like,
You can
neat,
watch it.
dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. I try to look to more like they're not like global news outlets because they are like based in places like New York Times and stuff like
Yeah.
that, but they are more of independent
global
bodies.
focused,
Yeah,
yeah.
and they do access a lot of news that New Zealand media doesn't bother with because they don't think New Zealanders care about it.
It's not even that they think New Zealanders don't care about it, though. That also plays into it. Like companies like the New York Times, Al Jazeera, they have more staff, they have more resources, they have people
100%.
in more places, so they can actually much more easily access news.
100%.
In particular areas, yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah. But if people had enough of a demand or an interest in that kind of thing, companies would respond to it.
Sure.
Is another side to that, I guess. I feel like we've been very argumentative with each other this episode.
Yeah. We're going through a divorce at the moment, guys. It's very unfortunate. Who gets the kids?
I don't want them.
Oh, what a shame. Yikes.
I don't want the kids. You can have them. I'm keeping the dog.
Well, I hate dogs.
Exactly. It's a win-win. It's a win-win. I get the cool stuff, and you get the crap that I don't want.
Wow, very cool.
I guess the other thing that I wanted to kind of mention before, because how are we going for time?
We're at 30, but we can...
Oh, okay, no, that's fine. I guess like another thing is with keeping up with current events, politics, sports and stuff like that, a huge thing of media is the media makes articles about things that interest people. And what interests people? Bad news.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get into like the motivations of... if you ever study media studies, you will have to read this, but there's a really good thing called... There's a really good... I don't know if it's a book or a journal or something. It's about Herman and Chomsky, and it's called The Propaganda Theory or Propaganda Model, something like that. And it kind of explains a lot of the major distortions in news. And one of them
Are you talking about the propaganda effect?
No.
Oh, okay, that's a psych thing. Never mind.
Herman and Chomsky, Noam Chomsky, smart dude.
I love
Anyway,
a bit of Chomsky.
one of the major distortions in news is like advertising, right? Like, except for like your RNZ, your BBC, who are like government funded.
Yeah.
As in they're bankrolled by the government.
Yeah, they're not a business.
They're not a business.
They're a business, but they're not a money-driven business.
They they still have to maintain like.
Oh, of course.
They still have to maintain viewers. They can't just
But they have a support system in place that means that they don't have to try produce stuff that constantly just makes money.
Every minute of the day.
Exactly. They can spend time on other things.
But yeah, stuff's a business. New York Times is business. They have to bring in money, and the way they do that mostly is advertising.
Yeah.
So there's a few things to consider there. If we're looking at digital media websites, advertising revenue is directly related to the amount of views you get, because the more views you get on your site, the more ads you can show.
The more exposure
money you can get. Yeah. So it is within Stuff's interest. It's within New York Times' interest. It's within their interest to have people view the site as many times as possible.
Yeah.
So it's within the interest to get you to stay there for longer. It's within the interest to have you click on articles.
Yeah.
It's within the interest to keep you interested.
Yeah.
And have stuff that interests you and draws you in.
I don't know if this is something that I imagine you don't, but there's like 7 main ideas of things that make for an article that would be interesting to people.
Probably.
And so one of them is if it's extraordinary. So if it's different, if it's unique, like the fireman washing up on Wellington's beach.
There's a common thing, and like a lot of journalists will talk about like the F me effect. Like, does this story make you go F me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another one is how close it is to you.
Yeah.
Another one is if it's women or children. Another one, or any kind of minority or exposed group. Another one in there is old people. They love talking about old people getting robbed. What else is there? There is...
It's like cultural proximity.
Cultural proximity.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why like global articles aren't always as published, because, like, at least in a New Zealand context, because it's a bit more difficult to pull it into how does this affect you as a New Zealander? And it's like, it doesn't have to affect you for you to care about it.
I mean, cultural proximity is like kind of the same reason like why you'd hear more about like American and British entertainment views rather than, say, China or India.
The issue with, and I feel like this is like a New Zealand issue with media, is because we don't have a lot going on, because we're just a wee country. That's not a bad thing. When I say we don't have a lot going on, that's not a bad thing. But what it does mean is that news businesses, I don't know why, anyway, news businesses attach, like, post stories that probably wouldn't make it to the news in a bigger country.
Sure, like, the
and
selection
what that
criteria
does, because exactly. But what that does is, when people consume media all the time about old women being robbed or a sex offender being released in a city near you, that sounded like an ad. or something like that. What it does is it makes people, and because media only wants to publish things that are extraordinary or unique or attention grabbing, what it does for people is it skews their ideas of what is normal within society and what isn't. When you are constantly presented with weird things, crazy things, gross things, things that make you say, me, you begin to think that that's the norm.
Sure, yeah.
And that this is genuinely an issue as well.
No. So absolutely. You're much more likely to hear that, there was a fire in such and such building downtown, and say 50 people died. That will make news.
Oh, 100%.
But you never get to hear a story be like, oh, in Wellington today there were no earthquakes.
Yeah.
Everyone was safe. There was no deaths on the road.
Yeah.
Actually, you do hear that sometimes because the police have made an effort to talk about that.
But that's because they've had to make an effort to talk about it more because. And I was going to get to it more.
You don't hear that today, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of flights did not crash.
Yeah. It's it's almost like that no news is good news.
Yeah.
Which means that the only news that is presented is bad news, right?
Something unusual has happened.
If you looked at the body of articles that were released, you would say the overwhelming majority of them were negative in some way, shape, or form.
Sure.
Obviously crime is a really bad one. They love crime as well. They love to post about crime.
Yeah, it's easy.
Oh yeah, it's easy. But the thing, the issue with that as well is it always grabs people's attention because white women love Ted Bundy, and with that as well as it also skews people's opinions of how much crime is actually happening. And I had this exact conversation with my grandma, I'm not kidding, she was like, oh, there are so many robberies and stuff happening, everywhere. She's like, this kind of crime didn't happen when I was a kid. And I was like, well, you know that when you were a kid, you also didn't have access to most of the things that do allow for crimes these days. You walked to school, you probably didn't have a car, colour TV wasn't a thing yet, don't tell me that there was less crime, y'all just couldn't get up to quite as much. It's an availability thing. It's also a skewing, media doesn't intentionally do it, it's a combination of factors, but people want to hear about things that interest them. Crime interests them, so media produces crime stories. What that makes people think is that there's a lot of crime going on. Not the case. Crime's been on the decrease for the past 20 years. Did you know that?
I did, but most people don't.
Exactly, and that's the issue there, is people are like, oh, crime is on the rise, and it's like, no, perceived crime is on the rise, but actual crime is decreasing, and it has been decreasing for the past 20 years.
That was Nationals, one of their fundamental policies. That was one of their fundamental talking points in policies was tough on crime. That was
yes. Oh my god. And exactly.
So that's what New Zealanders had for 9 years.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just it as well, is when people think that crime is on the rise, we're just going to use crime as this example here. When people think crime is on the rise because that's what they're interested in, and so that's what the media produces, that is what society thinks, and so politicians react, because remember it's a popularity contest, that they're going to be tough on crime because that's what people are concerned about, regardless of the facts. And that's how something like all these dynamics can actually become really harmful, and what it results in is longer prison sentences for lesser crimes that shouldn't be imprisoned for. It causes so many problems, and the worst thing that you could do for someone, particularly a minor offender or a first-time offender, is send them to prison.
Yeah.
Because so much
Once you go to prison, you're extremely likely to 100%. End up back in prison.
It is a criminogenic environment, and what that means is that in prison, y'all make homies with other criminals. It's a culture. It's there, and regardless of whether or not you want to get drawn into it, it is so difficult to get out of prison and stay out of prison. Yeah. And that's also got to do with marginalisation, the way that parole is organised these days, that it's based on that R&R. It's got to do with a lot of things. It's got to do with, a lot of the time it's got to do with the fact that society demonises people and doesn't want to accept them back after that. We are a very unforgiving society to people who act out in ways that we define as illegal. Because law is subjective as well, right? Everything's subjective. We create it.
Sure.
I've gone on a weird tangent, haven't I?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I'll stop. Anyway, media is good. Media is good for the most part. We need it.
Yeah.
We need it.
Yeah.
But there are negatives to it as well. And I guess that's what I wanted, was like this weird flow on.
About that as well. If you ever study first year media studies at uni, you'll kind of learn all the major effects.
Yeah, and if you want to like hate media a lot more, take criminology.
Yeah.
Because you can tell that we came from very different like areas. But no, I think you are right though. Like,
it's it's not perfect, but it's not out to get you either. Like,
there are groups of people that treat it as gospel, and there are groups of people who love to hate it as well.
Yeah.
It's very polarizing. Very polarizing.
But yeah, generally speaking, like, it's a positive.
Kia ora.
How's your holiday? Good.
It was great. Mahalo was fantastic.
Good.
Siren's been away.
Hi viewers, Siren's been away.
You didn't make it into the.
You didn't quite make it into the.
Is that your Moroccan chicken or Italian bolognese?
I'm just the voice in the background, like Batman, just sort of in the shadows. Oh shit! By the way, looks cool. You look like a bit of a lumberjack, you know.
Thank you.
You know, cut some trees down later on.
On a scale of 1 to Old MacDonald, how do I look today?
5 out of 10.
Ah, amazing. I like that.
It was a great way to end this.
Yeah,
You was here last week as well.
Oh no, I did have one more thing that I wanted to say. So, because eye-catching stories and stuff like that are generally negative, there are a lot of places, a lot of outlets and stuff out there. Obviously not as big; they're more independent. A lot of the times, it's more like blog style, but they do newspapers as well. It's people
Otago
who just.
Daily Times.
Pardon?
Otago Daily Times is one of the only independent papers in New Zealand.
Oh no, I was going into a different thing.
Oh, okay, don't worry.
Is that there are certain outlets that are just concerned with good news, and they want to like let you know about like cool things that are happening in the world that like don't make you feeling totally absolute 100% disdain for the human race. Like, so one is like the Happy newspaper. There's a bunch of other ones and stuff like that as well that you can totally look up. You can just.
I have one more thing to add, but you finish this. Yeah.
You can look up, positive news stories, and that is 100% a thing that's available to you as well. I think, particularly as you get fully into the depths of like that kind of stuff, if you want to know about the things that are going on in the world, unfortunately, a lot of the time it does tend towards negative things.
Yeah.
And so because of that, it can be nice to go look at some outlets that are telling you about the cool things that are happening in the world as well. Like Botswana legalizing, same-sex. Like.
One last thing that I want to is like, kind of like being critical of the way you consume news and like the perspectives that you're getting. So like the classic example people talk about is like echo chambers. Like on Facebook, you will just get fed like articles you care about.
Yeah.
But it's also
or they
good
think you care about.
Or they think you care about. But it's good to challenge your perspective sometimes. One way to do or a few ways to do that that's good is, because remember, when you go to a website like Stuff, you're only clicking on the articles that interest you.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So like one good way to counteract that is like pick up a newspaper, listen to the radio, watch like a little bit of TV news. I'm not a big fan of TV news, but radio, newspaper. Because that way you're kind of forced to listen, like you're forced to consume the content in a more linear manner.
Yeah.
Whereas online you can kind of just skip around and cherry pick what you're interested in.
Oh yeah, 100%. Oh, I can't remember where to find it. That's very upsetting. There is a part on your Instagram. Is there a settings?
What are you talking about?
Like IG settings. There's probably the big IG settings button. You can go to ads.
Yeah.
And you can go about ads. Oh no, or is it ad activity? And what you do is you can see like all the labels that Instagram has given your account about what they think you're interested in and how they tailor their ads to you, and it's always so funny and inaccurate.
You can also do that on Facebook. You can click on something and say, like, it will tell you why the ad was shown to you. Like, often it's based on age.
Some of them
or
are
geographic,
so wild though. Some of them are so funny.
Some of them are interesting.
Oh my god, I can't remember where to find it. Oh, this
you can
is
generally
upsetting.
definitely on desktop. You can just do it on any Facebook sponsored post.
Yeah, but like.
Oh, here we go.
You can see all the different kind of tags.
Oh, here we go. So I just got an ad for contact lenses. Why were you shown this post? I am 18 or older, live in New Zealand, and the reason given is I'm maybe similar to their customers. So I like a variety of like glasses and contact lenses pages because I wear contact lenses. So it's not like, but yes, occasionally you get some.
Some of them are very, very bizarre. I can't. Oh, I wish I could find
here
out
we
where
go.
it was.
Let's have a look.
Creative media
Creative
production.
medium production of Massey Uni. 14 people 14 to 55 who live in Wellington. Yeah, okay, that's again a very general targeting metric. Sometimes you do get like some
Go
real,
find like a wish.
yeah,
a wish
something like that.
Just something super out the gate.
Okay, yeah, like I'm getting real general at the moment. Like New Zealand Transport Agency wants to reach people who are 18 or older and live in Wellington when they're talking about a Wellington-based project. Actually, that is interesting. I'm interested in that.
Anyway, was that us for today? Or?
Yeah, I think that's us.
Okay, so I hope that...
Here's another one.
Oh.
I Say New Zealand, some survey company wants to reach people who speak English US.
We don't speak English
and
US.
are men aged 18 to 21 who live in or were recently in New Zealand. That's a bit more specific.
That's very specific.
Yeah, they're market research companies. I don't know, maybe they're trying to get some more 18 to 21 year olds.
Who have recently been in New Zealand.
And have been in New Zealand. Very cool group. IMO.
Interesting. Anyway, if any parts of this episode was really interesting to you at all, give us some timestamps. If you have any ideas of what you'd like us to speak about in future episodes, also feel free to let us know either in the comment section or I don't know the other kinds of methods.
Yeah, however you want.
However, whatever
Send
floats
us a
your boat.
postcard.
We
have a PO box.
I would thoroughly enjoy getting a postcard requesting a Wholesome half-hour episode.
But yeah, no, thanks so much for watching.
Yeah, no,
We'll
thank
see
you.
you next time.
Bye.